Honestly, the only reason I have this cup of tea with me is to compensate for the lack of yellow in this video. Hi, I'm Anya, also known as Meppity, and today I'll be critiquing my viewers' art. So the other day I went onto my Instagram and created a hashtag encouraging people to submit their art to it in order for me to review it. And I was expecting maybe 9 or 10 submissions, but oh my gosh, I was completely overwhelmed. I think there's almost 100 now. And thank you so much, guys. One thing I have to say is the sheer talent in that pile of images is phenomenal. I have really enjoyed looking at everybody's creations, but unfortunately I won't be able to critique everyone's. So in today's video I'll be going through just a handful. I hope this won't be the only video where I critique my viewers' art, so if you'd like your stuff to be looked at by me, why don't you post a submission into the hashtag meppitycritique. Be sure to be following me on both of my Instagram accounts and subscribe to me, and we'll see, who knows, maybe you'll be in a future video. I will be using my iPad because I'm currently filming with my phone, so it feels a little bit goofy going on Instagram on my big ass iPad, but never mind. So I have a lot of stuff to look through. Before I start critiquing, I want to say that I'm pretty much in no way qualified to be doing this, so take everything I say with a pinch of salt. A lot of it is also incredibly subjective and is purely based off my opinion, so if you want to disagree with me, that's completely fine. I just want to help people out because I get at least 4 or 5 DMs a day per account asking me for advice on their artwork, and there's only so many videos I can pump out onto my YouTube offering such advice. So I'm just hoping that this will have a positive impact regardless of whose work I'm critiquing. Ooh, let's start with this one. Okay, so this is a piece by Aria Doodles. I'm sorry if I've pronounced any of these names wrong, but I very much like this piece. I'm going to try and focus mostly on the visuals, not so much what you're drawing or the story behind it, just because otherwise we'll be here forever. But I very much like the colour scheme, and I think each character has their own suitable colour scheme too. My main suggestion with the actual piece as a whole is the composition. I'm assuming that it used to be more stretched out, but because of Instagram you've had to crop the top and the bottom, but the circle on the back is a little bit wonky, so I would bring it over to the right just a bit to center it. Moving on to the characters, the first thing that stands out to me is the limbs. So the legs on both seem very long, and not in a stylistic sense, but I think they look a little bit too out of proportion, especially in comparison to the short torsos. And in contrast to that, the arms are really short. So the guy has a very short upper arm, and I think you're trying to do foreshortening, but it doesn't translate across so well, and that's possibly because the feet are lined up level with each other, so it wouldn't make sense for his arm to come forward so much. And another comparison is the hand size. I think everything else is similarly proportioned to each other, the two characters, the heads, the legs, the feet, but her hands are far smaller than his, and I think it's a little bit too dramatic. Now, looking at the clothing, I really like your way of drawing with the creases. It's very nice, especially on the knees. Hair is really well done. You can see the ankle doesn't quite line up with the rest of the leg. Perhaps draw like a smooth line in your sketching phase and then try and build some structure around that afterwards, because it does look a little stiff. The main thing with the girl is that she seems to be gazing past the guy. She's not actually looking up at him, so it feels a little bit awkward. I would turn her head forward slightly so it isn't quite in profile and make her look up and away, so it looks as if they are directly communicating with each other. That's more or less it for this. I think this is great. I was immediately captivated by this piece by Syme Echo 2.0. I love the illustrative style a lot, and that it doesn't make sense proportionally and put in perspective wise, but it looks very intentional and has this level of charm to it. Your colour selection is fantastic. My main suggestions are also going to be compositional. So I personally would flip the girl around completely, because you have characters such as this frog creature and the little guys in the back. There's overall a lot more detail on the left side compared to the right. So if you flip her around, then it'll be a little more balanced. In addition to that, her foot kind of goes upwards, but it goes in the same direction as some of the fish and the water, and so it overall makes the image lose balance. And on top of that, I would possibly just add one shade lighter of your like pencil colouring in that middle section, just because it looks a little bit plain compared to the rest of the image. To help add to the balance, I am a strong believer in the rule of thirds. So I would push the water up just ever so slightly so that it would be along the top third line, and then that gap between the trees, I would push that slightly more to the right to make that also in the vertical third line. Does that make sense? I don't know. But those are my suggestions. Honestly, I think that's about it. I'm very happy with this piece. Keep up the amazing work. I really like what you're doing here. Right, let's take a look at this piece by Space Jug. So the first thing that stands out to me is, again, the composition. I think this seems to be a recurring issue in people's work, is that stuff isn't quite centered, and I am so anal about having things perfectly centered and framed correctly. Composition is just something that really bothers me, which is why I kind of avoid it overall with my pieces by having just something in the center rather than like having to deal with the whole piece. Anyway, what I would do is I would crop the shoulder slightly more to fit in with the Instagram proportions. I know sometimes that you don't want to do that because your image is not meant to be for Instagram, but just going that little extra mile can really help your feed generally look really nice. Then I would move the whole entire image over to the right slightly, because as you can see, the circle isn't quite in the center and the shoulder further adds to that off-balancedness. Moving aside from the composition, I think the colours are mostly nice. I really like what you've done with the skin and how you're using different colours for the lines, but something that immediately stands out to me is the eyes. That intense blue on the shadow is a little bit too intense, I think. It kind of detracts from the rest of the image. Overall, it's a very saturated image, so to balance it out, I would have actually picked a much lighter green, just to complement the image rather than try and make its way into the foreground along with the rest of the guy. As for shading, I think it mostly makes sense. There's some lines which don't quite add up. Like you seem to have added a shadow just going around the hair near the forehead, which doesn't quite make sense. And then the neck one is much harsher than, say, all the shading on the shoulders and the fabric. So I would just really consider what your light source is so that you can make sure that all of the shading matches itself. As for the hair, I really like the hair. I think you did a good job. There's nice flow and the shape of it is really good. The only thing I would have is maybe add a patch of light on the top, because it's just quite a large blank space of darkness, and again, it doesn't quite make sense. Overall though, the character, I'm very happy with it. I like the style of the facial hair and the round glasses. Although I'm not really sure where the rest of the glasses go. Is the nose sticking out so much so that that half of the glasses is missing? I can't quite tell. But overall, I'm very happy with this. It's very nice. Let's take a look at this piece by Franco's Portfolio. I like the energy in this piece. The characters seem to be very nice and smiley, although the first thing that stands out to me is they're all leaning to the side. It's just a little bit wonky, and so it looks kind of like the guy is about to fall over, as is perhaps the cat. The lady in the background, she's also leaning a little bit, but not so much. The best way to check if something's leaning or not is to flip it over. Now, with digital pieces, all you do is flip the canvas, but with something with pencil and paper or paint, just hold it up to a mirror, take a look and see if anything looks off, and then make your adjustments accordingly. The other thing I suggest is don't use lined paper. I know we all go through this phase where we exclusively draw on scrap paper and some masterpieces come out, and then as soon as we try and draw on nice paper, like, it looks rubbish. I've been there and I still am there most of the time. But do try and avoid lined paper because it cheapens the image overall. From this, I'm sensing you are more at a beginning stage of drawing. I think something to start taking into consideration is proportions and figuring out the human form. This can be achieved through life drawing. I've mentioned quite a lot in my videos now, Croquis Cafe on YouTube. It's a really great resource to practice life drawing and gesture, just to figure out anatomy and proportions of humans. But that's something that comes with practice. It's really not something you can immediately change, but the sooner you start working on life drawing, the faster and better you'll get at human proportions. Compositionally, I actually really like this piece. The angle is a little bit steep, so it kind of looks like the cameras are up at the ceiling, but that's fine if that's what you're going for. Otherwise, if you weren't, I would suggest lowering the floor line and the perspective to be considered. If you don't know perspective, I really recommend looking up how to draw 1 and 2 point perspective. It's actually quite simple, and once you get the hang of it, it really makes your images look good. Keep up the good work, good luck. I'm liking this very much. Ooh, okay, let's take a look at this portrait by Lagoon of Art. I really like the facial expression straight off the bat. She has this softness to her, and I feel like there's really something going on in her eyes. But the thing that immediately catches my eye is the lighting. So your shading has this muddiness to it, which often comes from 2 things. One is using very fuzzy tools like an airbrush, and it isn't intense enough, so it just kind of looks like this streak rather than an actual shadow. And the other thing is that your shading is too grey. Now, this is often achieved by selecting a colour and then literally just going darker. But what you need to do with shadow is often boost the saturation and sometimes shift the colour. So I almost always make my shadows a little bit more red than the rest of the colour palette. And 1, that brings some uniformity to the piece, and 2, it just makes it look a little bit more realistic. The way I actually shade is by creating another layer and setting it to a multiply blend mode. So if the art program that you're using does that, I really recommend it. It doesn't have to be multiply, it can be color burn or linear burn. There's loads of different versions, and they all basically add shadow rather than you having to do it manually. The same goes for the highlight. You've got a very grey, whiter colour, and it honestly looks a bit more like she's got flour in her hair than an actual highlight. I suggest you pick a cheerful light yellow and maybe do solid streaks rather than a kind of fuzz, and that can go all the way along the hair rather than just patches in the middle of the head and the bulk of the hair. Overall, it's pretty nice and balanced, just the ear is a little bit higher on one side and the nose is just slightly funky, but again, this can be fixed by flipping your art whilst you're drawing. I'm very happy with this, keep it up! Let's critique this piece by PazuzuFry. I very much like this design. There's a lot of emotion and I feel like I can read this character very well, but the thing that immediately stands out to me is the hair. So I know that most of my characters I just draw a flat shape and it looks nothing like hair, but when you are drawing more detail, it's very important to have a certain flow. So what's happening here is that your lines are all quite haphazard and very, very thin. So there's a lot more detail in the hair than in the rest of the image. To fix this, I suggest getting a slightly thicker brush and having more flow to the lines within the hair so that they match the shape. Now, if you want her to look like she has messy hair, you're already along the right track by adding like spikes coming out, and you can have pieces that go a bit haywire, but not so many because otherwise it just detracts from the rest of the image. I also suggest adding a little bit of hair in front of the neck because her head isn't quite in profile, so I think she would need a little bit of hair there for it to look balanced. I very much like this stick-shaped body paired with the big poofy dress. it is a very nice balance, and the big head as well. I do recommend though that you push the shape of the pose even more. So she's got like these slightly hunched shoulders, she's slumping over, so why not bring those shoulders forward even more, and the hips more as well, so she has more of an S shape in her back. By pushing these things, it just makes it even more readable. And now me going back to my composition thing, she's not quite in the center, so either move her more to the right to center her, or move her almost all the way to the left so that she's in that rule of thirds line. The style itself is quite scratchy, but in a nice way, although I suggest that with your lines in the dress, add a little bit more purpose to them. So when you're drawing these lines, think, are they flowing the right way? And make them just a little bit longer, because currently it just looks like you're not really sure how fabric works and that you're just hoping for the best by drawing lines. I also like this rim lighting that's happening, although it doesn't seem to be going everywhere, or in some places it's going where I don't think it should. For example, I don't think you need any on the bottom of the skirt, and perhaps you need some more on the back side of the hair. Other than that, I'm very happy. I love the design, I love the facial expression, I'm liking this bat. Just all the contrasts that you have in here are quite genius, it's great. I'm going for this landscape piece next by MelSketches. I think this is absolutely gorgeous. You have your perspective down and the colours are very nice. They're more saturated than something I would draw, but they are very complementary of each other, and it has this atmosphere that I very much like. I think the only suggestion though is I would make the cacti less green, because going by the lighting in the image, it's either dusk or dawn, and so they wouldn't be quite so vibrant green. I'd perhaps make them more yellowy and darker, suggesting that they are in shadow, because judging by the shadows in the buildings, the light is behind there, so they would also be backlit. Your line work is fantastic. You have great texture, especially on the path here at the front. I think my main suggestions would be to shift all of the buildings over to the right slightly, so that the windmill thing is in the middle, and I would move the path further to the left so that that is in the line of thirds, just so the whole thing balances out a little more, and that also allows the eye to scan across the image, which is what you'd like. Otherwise it kind of darts all over the place, especially with the high level of detail wherever you're looking. One other thing perhaps is I would remove the outer lines on the rock formations towards the back, and especially the very back ones, just to suggest distance. Great piece, Mel, I really like it. So that's all the pieces I'm going to critique today. This certainly won't be the last episode. I'd love to do this again sometime, and I'm really sorry if I didn't get around to your piece. I have looked at every single person's, and if you would still like me to critique, I am very happy to do it on DM. I might not be able to reply instantly because I do get a lot of messages, but I do want to support you and I love looking at everybody's art. If I did critique your work, please don't take anything to heart. I really liked all the pieces. Keep at it, you're doing great, and I'll see you around. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope it's been useful, especially to the people whose work I critiqued. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell down below. I make all kinds of different art related videos. And whilst you're at it, why don't you follow my Instagrams at anya.arts and Meppity. Anya.arts is more for polished works, whilst Meppity is more about sketches and doodles. And if you follow both of those accounts, you'll be eligible to enter this Meppity critique thing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!